Hi everybody, welcome back on channel and welcome back to my first tank review for quite a while, and as promised we are going to have a look at the new American Tier 7, the M-VII-Yoh, Yoh Yoh Yoh, which is the new American heavy tank line. And as I promised, I will go through each of these 7, 8, 9, 10, we'll do all top 4 tank reviews. So welcome back on channel. This is my first tank review in a while, so I hope I'm not too rusty and I hope you're going to find it useful. As I said, we're going to have a look at the Tier 7 heavy tank, which is the M-VII-Yoh. As I pointed out, these are heavy tanks, but in actuality the M in the designation stands for medium, so it's odd that Wargaming put them in as heavies, but anyway, that is what it is, right? This tank has pluses and minuses. It's a decent tank, and we'll go through all of those now when we look at the tech spec. Now, I'm going to point out a few really important things about this tank when you're setting it up, right? And you know, first thing I would say is that you need to get the top gun, because they're both 105mm, but the gun's available, but the top gun has much more pen, and you're going to need that if you're up tiered. So get that relatively quickly. You're going to need to use supercharge and refined gun on this. Don't think about using anything other than supercharge, and the reason is that the penetration loss on the gun system in this tank is fucking horrendous. Even with supercharge, it's bad. It's 5.8. It's almost 6%, right? But if you don't use supercharge, right, your penetration loss over distance, and bear in mind this is a heavy tank, is 11.62%. It's almost 12%. It's really high. So guys, you're going to need to use supercharge and refined gun to improve the accuracy, because the muzzle velocity is also low. On AP rounds it's only 1229 meters per second, same in HE. It goes up to 1535 meters per second on APCR on your Pramo. So it's low muzzle velocity anyway. If you don't use supercharge, it drops down to less than 1,000. It's 929 meters per second, which is horrible at Tier 7, particularly when you're going up against Tier 8 tanks as well. Pen on your standard AP round is 198, pen on your standard APCR round is 245, and on your heat you're getting 53. That's if you use gun rammer, which I would use, because your reload is considerably over 10 seconds, almost 11 seconds if you don't use gun rammer, and it's just too high for Tier 7 heavy. Plus the difference between pen is 198 and 208. So if you need that 10mm is not going to make too much difference. You're going to need to switch up to APCR for really heavy armor tanks. And with the standard AP round, using gun rammer at 198mm of pen, you can still pen the bottom plates on things like IS-3, etc. So you don't need to use the calibrated shells option. So get that better reload, improve your rate of fire, because the DPM in this tank is quite low anyway. It's under 2,000 damage points per minute. Right, so in terms of other key statistics on this tank, the gun handling is 11.6, which is actually gun handling is 11.6, which is actually pretty decent for a Tier 7 heavy tank. It's not bad at all. That's sort of like German levels of gun handling, which is pretty good. And its mobility index is 3.6, which is actually really good too. I mean, anything over 3 for a heavy tank is good, which is really good. So that's decent too, and it has decent top speed as well. And its power to weight ratio on hard terrain is actually decent at 16. And it has top speed 35, and it gets there relatively quickly on hard terrain. That suffers a lot in soft terrain, so if you're going into water or something, be careful, because the tank's characteristics change completely. You can see here, looking at the armor profile, it has decent armor profile, it has a vulnerable lower plate, but on the front and on the turret in particular, it is very decent. You can also side scrape in this tank. It has decent side armor as well. You can, if you look at the relative pen numbers that we just showed there on the top left of the screen, as you're seeing, you go into a side scraping position. It has armor on the side as well, which is you need on the side of the turret, because it has this really elongated turret, which is really fucking weird. Now, if you've ever seen a newborn kid, kind of looks a bit like that, or the Predator, or the Alien, H.H. Geiger's Alien, something like that, an elongated head. It's really weird. Actually, kind of looks like that experimental nuclear powered tank they built in the US, right? Now, you're probably thinking, oh, US tank, right? I'm going to go hold down. Well, here's the thing about this tank. As we look at the arm profile front on, you can see it's very good, right? Even against tier 8s and tier 9s, against tier 8s, it's pretty good. Against tier 6s, you're OP. But here's the thing, only has 7 degrees of gun depression. So kind of like as a benchmark, for me, anything over 10 degrees of gun depression is excellent and is a hold down tank. Anything over 8% is kind of, okay, you can kind of go hold down, but 8% below, it's difficult. So you can't really utilize this as a pure hold down tank. And if you're going into hold down positions in this, particularly if you're using a hill and not just hiding the bottom part of the tank. So say for example on vineyards, if you go to the center between around B and you're trying to go hold down there, you're going to get penned because you have to go that little bit further up to get your shots off. So just bear that in mind, guys. It is one of the weaknesses of this tank, and therefore the T29 is better as a hold down tank than this is. The T29 is not as maneuverable. It doesn't have as good a pen, etc. But it does have that 10 degrees of gun depression, right, which is basically makes a better hold down tank than this. So just bear that in mind. So if you're looking as to which American heavy line you should go first, I'd go T29 first because it's slightly easier to play. If you're an inexperienced player, this tank is okay. You can compensate for that lack of gun depression, and you can utilize the extra mobility. If you're going first to this line, I would go T29 first. Just some advice, guys, but obviously it's up to you, and you should play the game as you see fit, because it is a game and it's all about enjoyment, right? Let's have a look at some gameplay. So we're going to have a look at gameplay on Rockfield. Interestingly, this is, I think it's over 4,000 damage game. It's like 4.2k, some 4.3k, something like that. Not a mastery badge, which was a surprise, because like 4.2k damage is like really good at any tier, right? Even tier 10, 4.2k damage is a decent return. So it's odd that I didn't get a mastery and just got first class. I have mastered this tank, by the way, with less damage as well. I think it was the base captures that got pushed the XP over, right? Because as we said, XP is masteries and badges are about XP, not necessarily about damage. And this game is a perfect example of that. But it's interesting, right? So I've mastered all the tanks in this line all the way up to tier 10, right? And the other, and I'll show you the mastery game from this, which is actually a loss. In another video, we're going to look at decision making. We look at the bad decisions I made, which actually lost us the game. A couple of really bad ones I made at the end. I was like, oh, what the fuck I was doing. I got a monkey trying to fuck a doorknob at the end. I really don't know what I was doing. But we'll go through those, we'll analyze them, and hopefully you guys can learn from my capper mistakes. But this game we actually win. But what's really interesting is, guys, right? And I think this is sort of indicative of sort of a good, let's say, impartial benchmarking of these tanks, particularly as we go up, right? The mastery games on the, you see I'm utilizing the armor on the front there to get that kill. The mastery games is, by the way, here, guys, this is why you need to be running calibrated shells. Sorry, this is why you need to be running supercharge on this to get that extra muzzle velocity for it if you want to make those long shots like that. With a muzzle velocity of less than 1,000 meters per second, probably would not have penned that annihilator from that distance, especially given that we said you lose 12%, almost 12% of your penetration possibility. So instead of 100%, you've only got 88% chance of penning. That's huge, guys. So please run the, if there's one lesson you take away from this is run supercharge on this baby, on the gun system. It will pay off considerably. I thought, by the way, this guy here in the VK was AFK, but actually when we look at the stats later on, you'll see that we killed his crew. That's why he's just sitting there. So maybe he doesn't have a fully upgraded or whatever. Can't tell that from looking at the stats. But basically his crew were fucked, so that's why his tank wasn't moving. So which is as if, and I guess that's happened to you guys as it's happened to me. It's terrible. You're just sitting there like a fucking lemming for the slaughter, like, and there's nothing you can do, and you're giving yourself a blister on your thumb trying to move that fucking thing. You see there again another reason to use the supercharge, guys. Those pens on the KV3 wouldn't be possible with 12% penetration loss and a less than 1,000 meter per second muzzle velocity. It's basic physics. Yeah, I was making a point. Went to make a point about 3 times and I interrupted myself, so I do apologise. And you're probably saying, are you ever going to make that fucking point, Armored? Yes, I'm going to make the point now. The mastery games on the higher tier tanks in this, right? I'm going to take a massive hit from this guy here, by the way. I'm interrupting myself again. I know, the anticipation, it's awful, isn't it? No, the mastery games on this higher up, right? Very low damage for tier 10 masteries, right? I think they're both around less than 3.5k, between 3 and 3.5k damage. And not a significant amount of kills either. I think maybe 3 kills or something like that. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that the benchmark XP for this tank to get a mastery badge is not that high. What does that tell us? Well, it means that the tank is not that good, right? Because the tank is really good. And bear in mind, we've got really good players playing this, particularly up in tier 10, right? You've got like the best players around, right? But if they're struggling to get huge XP in this, then it tells you that the tanks are not that good, right? I mean, I think that's a fairly safe inference to draw from that data, right? And look, when we get to tier 10, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it, but when we get to tier 10 and we get to tier 9, you'll see that the XP scores are relatively low to get the mastery badges in it. And therefore, kind of points to the fact that the tanks are not that great because other players are not getting huge XP numbers in it, right? So, because the mastery badges are delivered relatively, right? It's 99% compared to other players, not compared to a certain fixed benchmark, right? So those stats don't lie. So there we go. As I said, almost 4.2k of damage. So you saw in that game, I think it's fairly good illustration of the tank's strengths and weaknesses, right? So first lesson, you definitely saw with some of the shots there, you need to have supercharged and refined gun. Otherwise, you're going to suffer with the gun handling on this tank for sure. Because that 11.6 score I gave you is based on supercharged and refined gun. You saw there the armor profile in action. You got some bounces you're able to ram in it. You saw its mobility, that mobility index of 3.6, which is great for a heavy tank. You saw that in action. And you saw it being able to pen and make some very nice shots. Didn't get a chance to look at the gun depression there, because I didn't use it because I don't think it really is such a great hold down tank. So I preferred to use its mobility, especially when I'm top tier. I prefer to use its mobility and get out there and start doing some damage and put your armor out in front. But remember, guys, that lower plate is vulnerable. Anyway, guys, I hope that you found that video useful. I hope that you found some of the tips and some of the observations useful. I haven't looked at any other YouTubers' reviews, so I don't know if I'm repeating myself or not. If I am, please forgive me. One last thing I'd like to say, by the way, is I said before that of all the YouTubers, only Littlefinger reached out to me. That's not true. Microforce reached out to me too, so big shout out to him. I do apologise, mate, for not mentioning you. You were actually the first to reach out. I think that's why I forgot, so I do apologise. Anyway, guys, that mistake rectified. Anyway, now I guess all remains for me to say is, as always, pants off. And if you haven't subscribed to him, please do. I'm going to put a link in for MicroforceX YouTube channel into the description, along, of course, with the great and legendary Littlefinger, Mr. Dan himself. Cheers, guys. Take care. Talk to you soon.